Flags will fly high for Inauguration Day at the Capitol building and also other buildings all across the country. We told you earlier this week that Governor Greg Abbott from Texas issued a proclamation saying that in Texas, the Capitol building and all state buildings will have the flags flying high for Inauguration Day, despite the fact that President Joe Biden has issued a proclamation that they should fly at half staff for 30 days to commemorate the life of Jimmy Carter, who passed away. He passed away. You all saw the funeral. Governor Ron DeSantis has joined forces with Governor Greg Abbott, and he issued a proclamation yesterday that says Inauguration Day is an important tradition of our republic where Americans come together to celebrate the peaceful transition of power between presidents. It represents a season of new hope and limitless potential for America's future. In light of the importance of this day and on this patriotic occasion, I hereby order all flags to be raised to full staff at the Florida Capitol and across all state buildings, installations, and grounds for the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. He goes on to say the following day, on Tuesday, January 21st, all flags, all state buildings, installations, and grounds across the state will once again be lowered to half staff to honor President Carter's service per the ongoing presidential proclamation issued December 29th, 2024. So you raise them up for one day, you bring them back down for a day. It seems like a pretty decent compromise. A lot of Democrats are up in arms, as you could imagine, because they want the flags flying at half staff for Donald Trump's inauguration. They want it to look like this country is in mourning, not because of Jimmy Carter, but because Donald Trump is returning to the White House. Also, Speaker Mike Johnson finally came out proclaiming that at the Capitol building itself, on January 20th, the flags of the Capitol will fly at full staff to celebrate our country coming together behind the inauguration of our 47th president. The flags will be lowered back to half staff the following day to continue honoring President Jimmy Carter. So again, this seems like a real no-brainer, but when it comes to Washington, D.C. and politics, no brain is usually the case. Speaking of the inauguration, President Donald Trump received a very exciting gift from the CEO of Coca-Cola. The CEO of Coca-Cola was at Mar-a-Lago, and look, he presented Donald Trump with his very own bottle, the very first bottle, by the way, of inaugural Diet Coke. Donald Trump is a huge Diet Coke fan. He drinks lots of Diet Cokes. It seems to be his drink of choice. Donald Trump doesn't drink alcohol of any kind, never has. And so Diet Coke is the thing that, it drives the country, if you will. It drives Donald Trump. It drove him the first 4 years of his administration. It drove him through the campaign, and it's going to drive our next presidency as well. You may remember talk of the Diet Coke button on his Resolute desk so he could hit it and someone would bring him a Diet Coke immediately. Well, this bottle it's pretty neat. It's the first time ever that the Coca-Cola company has created an inaugural bottle. It says January 20th, 2025, the inauguration of the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. There's a little box as well, and it goes in to say, founded 126 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia, the Coca-Cola Company takes great pride in producing hundreds of brands that people enjoy, along with our 60-plus independent bottling partners. The Coca-Cola, yada, yada, yada. We're proud to continue our decade-long tradition by celebrating the U.S. presidential inauguration with a commemorative bottle. There's a little QR code. I imagine that these will be for sale. I mean, it'd be silly if they weren't. Coca-Cola knows that Americans, and especially Republicans, and especially Donald Trump supporters, love their commemorative memorabilia. And this seems like it would be something for sure that one day would end up in the museum or in the Donald J. Trump Presidential Library, which I'm very excited. I don't really like libraries, but I know one day there will be a Donald J. Trump Presidential Library, and that's a library that I am very, very excited about. So if you see these on the shelf somewhere, the interesting thing about this, though, is how much of a turnaround we've seen since Donald Trump's first presidential administration. In 2016, there was this sense of overwhelming shock and awe, and it didn't seem like any world leaders, any government leaders, it didn't seem like any, industry leaders, nobody on Wall Street, none of these CEOs, nobody wanted anything to do with Donald Trump. And in fact, they would shy away away from him. There was a mutual disrespect, if you will, or an overall disrespect for Donald Trump's presidency in many of these industries and with many of these powerful leaders. Now we've seen a complete 180 with Mark Zuckerberg, for example, the CEO of Facebook, coming to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump. We heard an announcement yesterday that he will be on the platform along with Jeff Bezos, another anti-Trump billionaire, outspoken critic, owner of the Washington Post, which spent years just admonishing Donald Trump, within their pages and on their websites. So it is really interesting to see how this has turned around. And of course, Coca-Cola, a company that never, ever really wanted to get political, now not only creating an inaugural bottle, but the CEO traveling to Mar-a-Lago to present it to President Trump, shows a very exciting turnaround. Speaking of very exciting turnarounds, man, Donald Trump said something yesterday on, he released this on Truth Social, which is how he makes all of his policy announcements. And I'm all here for it, by the way. If you own a social media company, which Donald Trump does, if you own a social media company and you're the president of the United States, you might as well make all of these proclamations and make all of these decisions on that social media company so that you can draw some attention to it. But Donald Trump announced that he is creating an external revenue service. We're all familiar with the Internal Revenue Service. We all know about the IRS. Well, Donald Trump now says we're going to have an external revenue service. For far too long, he said, we have relied on taxing our great people using the Internal Revenue Service. Through soft and pathetically weak trade agreements, the American economy has delivered growth and prosperity to the world while taxing ourselves. It is time for that to change. I am today announcing that I will create the External Revenue Service to collect our tariffs, duties, and all revenue that come from foreign sources. We will begin charging those that make money off of us with trade, and they will start paying, finally, their fair share. January 20th, 2025 will be the birth date of the External Revenue Service, Make America Great Again. Now, this is good, and this is also, well, this is very interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, the External Revenue Service, it really seems like an idea that has just been far too long coming. The Internal Revenue Service is what was created to tax Americans and grab money from the people of the citizenry, because that seems, that's the lazy man's way. That's the way to go. The IRS, okay, great. We can just force all these citizens to pay us money all the time. We can force the companies to give us money from their payroll, and they're not going to complain because we're giving them valuable services like roads and schools, although the roads and schools aren't living up to snuff these days, and I'd like some of my tax dollars back. National defense, all those kinds of things. So that seemed like the lazy and the easy way to go. The harder way to go, but the much more convenient way to go, is the External Revenue Service. There's money that is owed to us by other countries, and there is money that countries are stealing from us, basically, with these lopsided trade deals. And Donald Trump, being the tariff czar that he is, being the guy who goes, look, we could fund so many things in this country. We could fund so many things in America. We wouldn't have to tax anybody. Well, there's so much money that we're leaving off the table or on the table. We need to grab it and go. And we need an entire government agency to do that. So he's going to create the External Revenue Service, and the External Revenue Service will be in charge of tariffs and going out into the world and making sure that we are not being taken advantage of, and really collecting all the revenue that's owed to us from foreign entities, not domestic entities like people and Americans, but foreign entities. And this goes back to NATO. Remember, Donald Trump loves to tell the story at NATO, how they would come to him and he said, look, if you don't pay, I'm not going to protect you. And they said, wait a minute, sir, are you telling me that if we don't pay our fair share and there's aggression from Russia or some other country, China, you're not going to protect the United States of America? And he looked at them and said, yes, if you don't pay, if you're in default, then I will not protect you. It's like insurance. You don't pay your insurance, they're not gonna pay your hospital bills. And so he goes, all of a sudden the checks started coming into NATO. He goes, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe how much these people were paying. Donald Trump sent the rest of the world to collections and they paid up. And now he's creating an entire government agency to do just that. Now, a lot of people are skeptical, saying, hey, Donald Trump said he was going to cut the size of the federal government. Here he is announcing he's creating a new agency. I think in the end, it'll be a net loss for the government. I think he's going to destroy and dismantle and cut and trim and demonetize and shut down so many government agencies and offices. I think he's going to cut the fat out of our government programs so much that creating one new agency there's still going to be an offset, and there's going to be a net gain when it comes to the federal budget for the United States of America. I myself am thrilled for the External Revenue Service. And I think, you know what, maybe those 87,000 IRS agents that the Democrats voted into existence so that they could go out and tax your Venmo for $600, maybe they could get jobs at the External Revenue Service. And instead of taxing your Venmo for $600, maybe they could go and tax China and Europe and Canada and Mexico for all of the money that they've been taking from us in the way of unfair trade agreements all of these years. As far as immigration goes, that's something that Ron DeSantis, by the way, the governor of Florida, he's called a special session back into order. He called a special session to handle the immigration problem. Donald Trump on day one is going to sign a bevy of executive orders. So many executive orders are going to be signed by Donald Trump. It's going to be amazing. And when these executive orders get signed, what's going to happen is Donald Trump is going to need help. And Ron DeSantis said, we're going to need some help as well. So he's called state and local officials in Florida back. President-elect Trump was elected with a mandate to stop illegal immigration and deport illegal aliens already in our country. State and local officials in Florida will actively facilitate the Trump administration's policies against illegal immigration. And to do that, we need to immediately set aside and approve the necessary funding and resources. As part of the special session I called for January 27th, the week after President Trump is sworn in, I'm calling on the legislature to appropriate funding for detention, relocation, transportation, infrastructure, local law enforcement support, and everything else needed for Florida to carry out their mission. So the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who, by the way, was at Mar-a-Lago golfing with Donald Trump yesterday. I don't know how it went. I didn't know. I've never seen Ron DeSantis golf. I've seen Donald Trump golf a lot. I know he's got a pretty good handicap. I don't know about Ron DeSantis. But he was at Mar-a-Lago. They were golfing and they were talking, I assume. And Ron DeSantis said, look, I'm going to help you. And in order to do that, we're going to call back the special session of the Senate, and we're going to make sure that you have all the funding you need. I imagine this is going to start happening in other states as well. Typically, when Florida does something in favor of Donald Trump, the other states fall into line. I would imagine Texas, perhaps Tennessee, perhaps a couple of other places like that. They're going to be. That's where you're going to start seeing. That's where you're going to start seeing these things pop up. But it looks like the rest of the states, or at least the red states, are falling in line to help Donald Trump on day one. January 20th, Donald Trump signs these proclamations. January 27th, a week later, Ron DeSantis has his government back in session to help facilitate all of these things. I wanted to mention this because this is kind of interesting. Donald Trump, he posts a lot from his Truth Social. He posts a lot on X. What we've never seen him do is copy and paste an actual text message of his anywhere on social media. At least I haven't seen it, and I don't think it's happened. And this happens, from time to time. Someone will post a text message that they get because they go, oh, this is funny, or look, I was texting back and forth with my mom. She's so silly, or I can't believe my dad reacted this way. All that kind of stuff, right? But Donald Trump posted a text message. I don't know if it's him sending a text message to somebody else or somebody sending a text message to him, but it's about the situation in California and the wildfires. And this is an interesting kind of roundabout if you think about it. The actual irony, the text message begins, the actual irony, ... A homeowner consents to pay property taxes that will go to the fire department. The funds are diverted to illegal immigrants because LA is a sanctuary city. An illegal immigrant comes and sets your house on fire, and the fire department doesn't have the resources to put it out. The homeowner paid for their own destruction. Think about that. You're taxed in LA. Your taxes are supposed to go to fund the fire department, but the government, and we know this, they cut the funds from the fire department. We know that the mayor cut the funds from the fire department by like $100 million or something ridiculous like that, and diverted them to programs for illegal aliens. Because LA is a sanctuary city. California is a sanctuary state. And so now that the fire department has been defunded to pay for the illegal immigrants set fires that destroy the homes of the people who paid taxes. And guess what? They're not going to be able to afford taxes anymore. They're not going to be able to pay taxes anymore, which means that not only did the homeowners pay for their own destruction because the fire department couldn't come and put out their fires and there was no water in the reservoir, there was no water in the hydrants. But now everybody's going to be suffering. On top of that, the government is so inept that the insurance companies won't insure houses here anymore. So the homeowner is left with nothing. And that is a big problem. Here in Florida, we had a similar issue with hurricanes. Hurricanes were coming in and they were devastating Florida. And what would happen is the economy was so bad under Joe Biden, and the goods or the supplies, the lumber, everything that you needed to rebuild a home if it was destroyed or damaged by a hurricane was so expensive under Joe Biden's ridiculous economy. Bidenomics made everything just ridiculously expensive. The gasoline to bring all of these resources back to the homeowner so that they could rebuild their home, it was just too much. And so the insurance companies were like, we can't afford it anymore. And a lot of them left the state of Florida. It's been a big problem here. And now you're seeing the same things going on in California. And it's not because of the hurricanes. It's because of the government, the mismanagement. They see the destruction, the potential destruction that could come from these horrible policies. They see that the mismanagement by Gavin Newsom and others could lead to a devastating wildfire that destroys so many buildings that there's no way an insurance company could cover it. So they dropped the policies, and now Donald Trump says the homeowner is left with nothing. This is from a direct text message. Again, I'm not sure who he's talking to or if someone was telling him this, but it is interesting to have a president who just screen grabs their messages and posts them on the internet for everybody to see. And then one final note I wanted to share was about Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's first nominee to face the Senate for confirmation. Donald Trump has, his entire cabinet is there. His entire cabinet is in place. And now the confirmation hearings have begun. And yesterday, Pete Hegseth came in for his confirmation hearings, and everybody believes did a phenomenal job, even though he was attacked on all sides by crazed lunatic Democrats who seem to think that not only were they above him, but that Pete Hegseth needs to be infallible to be the Secretary of Defense, and that for some reason Pete Hegseth was not, because he is a soldier, because he is a man, because he acts like he has testosterone pumping through his body, which I assume he does, because of all those things, he is disqualified. And Senator Reid, who is the ranking member, started off with a very condescending back and forth that Pete Hegseth, I thought, handled brilliantly, and I wanted to share that with you quickly.
Briefed by a JAG officer. Well, by the way, would you explain what a JAG-off is?
I don't think I need to, sir.
Why not?
Because the men and women watching understand.
Well, perhaps some of my colleagues don't understand.
It would be a JAG officer who puts his or her own priorities in front of the warfighters. Their promotions, their medals, in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front lines.
Thank you, Senator Reid.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. That was the back and forth pretty much all day. It was Pete Hegseth getting attacked by Democrats, screeching Democrats, Mazie Hirono from Hawaii just acting the fool, Kristen Gillibrand from New York getting unhinged and emotional. It was really, really kind of weird. But Pete Hegseth handled them all brilliantly, did a fantastic job, as I imagine most of the other Senate nominees, or the cabinet nominees who are going into Senate confirmation today will do as well. Although I believe Pete Hegseth probably had the hardest road. I think it's all downhill from here. Pam Bondi, who's the nominee for Attorney General in the Trump White House to lead the DOJ, will testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee at 9:30. Sean Duffy, Transportation Secretary, will appear before the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee at 10 a.m. Marco Rubio will face the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at 10 a.m. for his hearing to become Secretary of State. Russell Vogt, I believe it is, for Director of the Office of Management and Budget, will testify at 1 p.m. And Sean Duffy, Transportation Secretary, they have him listed twice. I don't know why, but I guess they're really excited about Sean Duffy's nomination because they have it. It's again at 10 o'clock today, and we will bring you all the highlights. Listen, if there's anything that you don't get from the 47 Daily podcast, because this is a podcast that is dedicated to everything coming out of the Donald Trump transition team, everything coming out of the Donald Trump White House, from the White House to my ears from the White House to my mouth to your ears for the next 4 years. That's our motto. But there is so much more to cover in the wake of all the news that's going on, and we do so every single day in Mark Kaye Saves the Republic, our daily podcast. Commentary, interviews. We had an interview yesterday with a fellow who's running for Congress. If you want even more of this information, if you want even more to know what's going on in the world, make sure every single day at noon you can live stream us on any of our live streaming platforms, or you can go to your favorite podcast platform and download it. iTunes, Spotify, we're everywhere. It's called Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. Download, listen, and enjoy.